Just a few days ago, Virgin Orbit was once again successful in deploying small sats into low Earth orbit and actually a little bit beyond that for a variety of customers from a horizontal launch platform. This is the sort of thing that most launch providers are not exploring because of limitations, or at least perceived limitations, of just how much an aircraft can carry, up to about 10,000 meters or so, in order to get it the rest of the way into orbit. Even though it's a very good way to get small sats into orbit, as Virgin Orbit has recently demonstrated, it's not widely regarded as being the best way to get heavy payloads all the way up there, or least of all human beings. And even though Virgin Galactic has demonstrated that they can send human beings into suborbital flight for a few minutes, not too many people are really looking upon the horizontal launch platform as a realistic way to get human beings into space in the future. But this is actually not the case. Virgin Orbit has a very ambitious plan for the future, but it's not just Virgin Orbit we're talking about here. Their ambitions actually can't hold a candle to their longtime partners at Scaled Composites, now known as Stratolaunch. And for those of you who have followed my channel for some time, you're probably aware of the fact that I'm not just about slamming on Jeff Bezos, slamming on Boeing, slamming on SLS and Starliner and that sort of thing. I'm also about trumpeting the successes of innovative companies who are doing things that others said was impossible. And Stratolaunch, in my opinion, is one of those examples. This is an aircraft that is bigger than any aircraft that has been built in the past. It is an aircraft carrying an unbelievable payload up to 10,000 meters, and an aircraft or a horizontal launch platform that could send substantial payloads into orbit. Very substantial payloads. We're talking about as many as 4 to 6 crew members on a human-rated spacecraft. So while the world has remained completely focused on things like Starship, SLS, and other mega rockets being launched in the traditional way, companies like Scaled Composites have been quietly developing a totally innovative way of getting heavy payloads up to orbit without mega rockets. And with the successful advent of Stratolaunch, this is becoming more and more plausible all the time. And Virgin Orbit, by the way, and Richard Branson, I'm sure, are closely watching this development, because after all, they were the ones who purchased the whole Unity spacecraft concept from Scaled Composites in the first place. And given Stratolaunch's current financial position, I would not be at all surprised if we didn't see Virgin Orbit and Stratolaunch collaborate to create something truly special. My name is Jordan Wright. I was born in the same year that the human race took its first steps on the surface of another world, and then we promptly betrayed those people's legacy by never going back. But now, over half a century later, there's a new breed of pioneers that are seeking to finish what these people set out to do so long ago. But there is trouble as well, so it's time for commentators like me to stop being polite and start getting angry! Now that Virgin Orbit has 3 straight successes under their belt, horizontal launch platforms are looking like a very reliable and solid method of getting things up to orbit. The question is, how big can these things be? Right now, Virgin Orbit seems to be focused exclusively on the small sat market, and for good reason. This is likely going to comprise the vast majority of satellites that get sent into Earth orbit in the future, an industry that could be as big as $30 billion. One would hardly blame Virgin Orbit for just sticking with this kind of model, especially considering that their competition, people like Rocket Lab and that sort of thing, are not very numerous right now. Now that's going to change sometime in the near future, but currently Rocket Lab and Virgin Orbit are the 2 primary providers of small sat launch services. Granted, you can send up your small sats on rideshare missions with a Falcon 9, but if you really want to do that, then your payload better be going to a similar orbit as the primary orbit for the primary customer on the Falcon 9. That's the problem with rideshare. It's not going to go up promptly, and it may not go up to the orbit that you want it to go to, whereas Virgin Orbit can be chartered essentially to send your payload where you want it to go for a relatively low price, and Rocket Lab is very much the same thing. So, as I said before, it wouldn't be surprising if Virgin Orbit stuck with this model, but they're not. Instead, Virgin Orbit recently received funding from the US government to research breakthrough technologies for their 2nd and 3rd stages of Launcher 1. The 3rd stage, of course, does not currently exist, but it's something that Virgin Orbit intends to add, and they're looking at putting ion engines onto Launcher 1 in the future, at least the upper stage. What this means is you can deploy larger payloads using less fuel. Ion engines, of course, can't be used for liftoff, but once you have your payload in orbit, an ion engine can push it much, much further out, all the way to the moon, or possibly all the way to Mars. Virgin Orbit, instead of resting on their laurels, is aggressively pushing forward with new technologies and new destinations. And before I go any further, I would like to personally ask all of my viewers to please subscribe, especially if you're a return viewer. I apparently have 115,000 return viewers on top of almost 70,000 new viewers. If I were to get 2/3 of those to subscribe, I would have over 100,000 subscribers at this point. My Blue Origin and Boeing cups would be blown to small bits, and my channel would be heading to new levels of success. Now, granted, you're not obligated to do this, but at the same time, if you like this sort of content, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and I guarantee I'm not going to be marketing you or contacting you in any way if you do subscribe. That's enough of that. Let's move on to the topic at hand. So as I said before, Virgin Orbit is looking at using new technologies to get all the way to Mars and other destinations throughout the solar system, but only with small sats. What about the idea of launching human passengers into orbit, or perhaps suborbital, supersonic, or hypersonic flight all the way to other destinations on Earth in the space of, say, 90 minutes? Well, as we all know, Virgin Galactic has achieved suborbital flight with passengers on board, but only for 3 minutes or perhaps 4 in microgravity. This can be used for some basic scientific experiments and that sort of thing, but not for anything truly ambitious or aggressive, and it's essentially just space tourism. But Virgin Galactic and Richard Branson have teased the idea of making this into a type of service that would take you anywhere on the planet in the space of 90 minutes or so, something called Spaceship 3. Although we haven't seen any designs for this yet, it has been a very compelling idea. But what if I were to tell you that the whole concept behind Spaceship 3 has already been designed by Stratolaunch and could conceivably be used by companies like Virgin Galactic to deliver passengers all over over the planet, or perhaps even to low Earth orbit. Well, this is the first step in that ambitious plan. The Talon A, a vehicle that's only 8.5 meters in length, 3.4 meter wingspans, and a weight of just under 3 metric tons. However, it can conduct long-duration flights at Mach 6 and then glide back for an autonomous horizontal landing on a conventional runway. It will be capable of autonomous takeoff under its own power via a conventional runway. However, initially, this is going to be launched by the Stratolaunch vehicle. Up to 3 of them could be launched nearly simultaneously. And by the way, this is something that the US military and Space Force is incredibly interested in, because the Russians, as most of us know, have come out with a variety of hypersonic missiles designed to deliver nuclear payloads. So having a potential hypersonic interceptor is something that the US military would probably pay very dearly for. But aside from military applications, this is the first step in hypersonic transport for the human species, and I'm not exaggerating here. Now, traditionally, horizontal launch platforms have been restricted by the cargo capacity of the vehicle concerned, in other words, the carrier aircraft, but the Stratolaunch carrier is a breakthrough on every possible level. This is an aircraft that's even bigger than Howard Hughes' legendary Spruce Goose, or the Hercules as he called it, an aircraft that drove him slowly insane because of the engineering challenges behind it. If he had had the jet engines that this thing had at its disposal, I think he probably would have designed this instead of the Spruce Goose. But this is the largest aircraft in human history, with a wingspan larger than an American football field, including the end zones. 6 Boeing 747 engines with a total payload capacity of just under 227 metric tons. With such a gigantic payload, it's not very surprising that initially Stratolaunch was looking at SpaceX to provide them with the rocket that they were going to launch into orbit. As a matter of fact, SpaceX was seriously looking at Stratolaunch as being the launch platform for the Falcon 9. Obviously a much smaller Falcon 9 than what they're using right now, but still, their flagship rocket was initially supposed to go up on this. And unsurprisingly, the Stratolaunch is capable of carrying more payload than any aircraft in history. The Antonov 225 set the previous record at 187.6 tons from Frankfurt Hahn Airport in 2009. Now, granted, the Stratolaunch has not yet carried its maximum payload, but there's no reason to think that it's going to be unable to. This thing is going to be breaking a whole lot of records very soon, aside from just being the biggest aircraft on the planet. As a matter of fact, one of the earliest goals for the Stratolaunch was to launch a vehicle the size of the space shuttle, either to orbit or suborbital flight. Now, that may seem impossible, but consider that the empty weight of a space shuttle is 24 metric tons or so. If you were to be able to put a rocket with the remaining 200 metric tons for propulsion, who knows what you might be able to accomplish. But still, the Stratolaunch is not going to be launching something as big as the shuttle, but what it can launch is pretty damned impressive. For example, consider the Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser. Now, the Dream Chaser Stratolaunch collaboration is a concept that's been out for a very, very long time, all the way back to 2014 as a matter of fact. And although it never really came to fruition, it's still something that could happen. We're not talking about a full-scale Dream Chaser here. It would have to be scaled down a bit, but we are still talking about a Dream Chaser that would be capable of carrying 2 to 3 astronauts to orbit, all the way to the ISS as a matter of fact, and it's a mission that could, at least in theory, be carried out with only 24 hours worth of notice, which means if you needed emergency crew delivered to the ISS, or if you needed an emergency vehicle to deliver replacement crew and then bring ill or injured crew members back to to Earth under a very low gravity, gentle re-entry kind of scenario, because the Dream Chaser only subjects the passengers to 1.5 G's worth of re-entry force, well, that's something you could never accomplish with a vertical takeoff facility, whereas it's something you could do with a horizontal launch facility. And in case you're thinking that I'm making all of this up, here's a concept that was released by Sierra Nevada years ago, with Stratolaunch providing the necessary propulsion up to 10,000 meters, and then a rocket-propelled Dream Chaser going the rest of the way. It was a very unique and innovative idea that may not have come to fruition at the time, but given how much work Sierra Nevada is doing right now to be competitive, it's something that could very well be resurrected. And there are so many different applications that you could use with a launch platform that's capable of carrying well over 200 metric tons worth of cargo. It's like taking Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic and pumping it up with steroids. There's just so many different things that can be accomplished by this new aircraft, and Stratolaunch has quietly accomplished this for less than $1 billion. Yes, the entire company is actually worth less than $500 million. And by the way, this company's concepts do not simply consist of a bunch of computer-generated images. As you can see, the Talon is already under construction, and oh, if you're wondering about the engines, well, check this out. Stratolaunch has already carried out pre-burner and full-fledged engine tests on what's called the PGA engine for their future vehicles. This has up to 200,000 pounds worth of thrust and is going to be able to catapult things much heavier than small sats into LEO or all the way into geosynchronous transfer orbit. We're talking about a completely different level of capabilities for a horizontal launch platform. This is something, by the way, that Virgin Orbit has been keeping a very close eye on. They operate out of the same spaceport, out of Mojave. They're right next door to each other, as a matter of fact, Virgin Galactic and Stratolaunch. They have maintained their partnership for a very long period of time. Now, does that mean that Virgin Orbit is going to purchase or take over everything that Stratolaunch has in the works? Well, I kind of doubt that. However, it should be remembered that Stratolaunch founder Paul Allen died in October of 2018, and he was providing a lot of the funding for this company, and consequently, the company actually ceased operations in 2019 and then was bailed out by Cerberus Capital Management. The company is worth only about $400 million, which would be a drop in the bucket compared to Sir Richard Branson's financial capabilities. There is little question in my mind that Sir Richard is keeping a very close eye on what's going on with Stratolaunch, and as their capabilities evolve, I think that he is ultimately going to embrace what they're going to create, including this, what's called the Black Ice, a vehicle, a reusable spaceplane, as a matter of fact, capable of going to low Earth orbit or to suborbital flight from one part of the Earth to another in the space of about 90 minutes. This is the Concorde taken to the next level by several degrees, as a matter of fact. The transportation vehicle of the future, capable of taking off from a runway, granted a very long runway, but a runway nevertheless, traveling through space and then landing anywhere on the planet that has a sufficiently long runway, and it wouldn't have to be exceptionally long compared to the runway that the Stratolaunch would require. All of this happening in the space of 90 minutes from one part of the planet to another. This would be a huge step forward in the future of transportation. Now, granted, it would also be a very expensive thing, but to the wealthy people of the world, even if it cost a couple $100,000 for a ticket, consider how much these people get paid per hour and how much they would save their respective organizations if they only took 90 minutes to to make a round-the-world flight as opposed to 12 hours or so on a 747. But more importantly, what if you could deliver orbital space travel for the same price, or somewhere in that vicinity? The ability to fly to orbit and perhaps to a future private space station for a few $100,000 instead of tens of millions. Imagine the change that might represent. The opportunity for a whole lot more people to go to space than currently have that opportunity even on the Crew Dragon. This would completely change the nature of space travel and the types of people who might be able to afford it, and indeed make it possible even for future companies who operate in space, who are building things in space, to transport their employees up to space for a much more affordable price. This has the potential to revolutionize the future of space travel in a way that Crew Dragon has yet to even come close to accomplishing. And all of this is very close on the horizon, very doable, and well within the purview of what Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit, and Richard Branson wants to accomplish. And it's not just about human spaceflight, it's also the capability to deliver satellites into orbit on very short notice, the ability to deliver hypersonic interceptors to potential incoming attacks from hostile nations, the ability to deploy emergency supplies to a space station in 24 hours instead of days or weeks. So many things that can be accomplished with a horizontal launch platform that cannot be accomplished with a vertical launch platform. And not only that, it's going to open up these opportunities to other countries as well, which is one of the main reasons that the United Kingdom is opening up so many spaceports, and the majority of those are oriented towards horizontal launch. And I don't think that all of them are going to be used by Virgin Orbit. I think they have Stratolaunch firmly in their sights. Once again, if you like this kind of content, please like and please subscribe to my channel. And on top of that, if you are able, check out the description and support my channel as a Patreon supporter. There are many benefits that are expanding all the time that I'm offering to these sorts of subscribers as well. But a like and subscribe would make me very happy, so please consider that. And until we start looking at horizontal launch platforms as the future of space flight and truly exploit the capabilities of Stratolaunch and things like it, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.